Hey there, everyone! Today is the return of Writing 101. This is the series of videos where I talk about everything writing related, as you could probably guess from the title. Today's video is about plotting, pantsing, and plantsing. And if you have no idea what any of those terms mean, that's okay, because that's what this video is all about. So before we begin, I've got a couple of disclaimers for you. Number one is I will never tell anyone that there's only one way to do it and I do this because I said so. No, that's not what this video is here for. That's not what I'm trying to do. Disclaimer number two is this video is only going to focus on what is involved with before writing the first draft of the manuscript. This is not focusing on second draft onwards or whatever. That is a completely different video that will come around in the future. Okay. So, plotting, pantsing, and plantsing. So I'm going to start with the one that's most obvious first and the one that most people will know about, and that is plotting, otherwise known as outlining. A plotter is someone who plans out the entire book in advance. They know exactly what's going to happen in every paragraph of every chapter of the book. They know all the major plot beats, they know all the side plots, they know all the character arcs, and they know exactly how they're going to be implemented at every step of the way. The exact method of outlining is different from person to person. Some people draw up an actual formal outline, and other people just do like simple point form notes. Whatever works for them. Next, we're going to talk about pantsing, which is also commonly known as discovery writing. A pantser doesn't use an outline at all. Most of their plots and arcs are only partially planned out in their head or in very, very simple, basic notes on a sheet of paper. They prefer to let the story develop naturally as they write. For a pantser, this is what makes writing the book fun. They let it come to them as if it was something that was real, as if something that is natural. They let the creative process work on its own. You never quite know how things are going to develop until they get to that point, and there's always a sense of mystery and wonder. Plantsing is generally a hybrid form between plotting and pantsing. Plantsers can't plot out every single thing, but neither can they just let every single thing come to them. Plantsers use basic outlines, normally as a way of just plotting out the major plot points, or as like just some basic starting points or guides, and then they just let everything else come to them as they write, like a pantser does. Now, one of the major questions a lot of writers would have at this point is, how do you know which one of these three is right for you? And I'm sorry to say there's really no easy answer to this. Yes, there are a lot of writers who are planners, but it isn't the be-all and end-all of writing, despite what a lot of planners will tell you. The only way to know for sure whether plotting, pantsing, or plantsing is right for you is for you to use trial and error with each one to figure out exactly what works. The other thing to keep in mind is not everyone sticks with one form over the course of their life. Some might start out with pantsing at first, and then some years down the line they might figure out that planning actually is starting to work better for them, so then they'll go towards that, or vice versa. And no matter what, you have to keep in mind, never let anyone tell you that your method is the wrong method. So long as your chosen method works for you, it is the right method, and to hell with what anyone else says. Now, how about a story? I'm going to tell you how I figured out which method worked for me. So when I first decided I was going to write a novel, I was researching various what is considered to be best practices when it comes to writing. And at first I thought I should be plotting, because with so many articles and blog posts and YouTube videos that I found, so many of them were like, plotting, use an outline, use an outline, use an outline. And so I'm like, okay, I guess that's the de facto way to go through all of it. So I started a simple outline, point form notes type thing. And when I was trying to outline my book, my mind, it started flooding me with information from multiple points throughout what would eventually be my manuscript. And it was sporadic, and it was with like so much detail that it was sabotaging my efforts to plan stuff out. The more I tried to plan, the worse I got. It was only once I decided to junk the outline that my mind started to calm down and progress could be made. Now keep in mind, that's the way my mind works. That's just my experience. This doesn't work for everybody. This is just me. This is just an example. Now, what about planning other things, such as character profiles or backstories or world building? It's probably here that the definitions of plotting, pantsing, and plantsing become more guidelines than actual rules, because this is completely dependent on who you talk to. For most people, this is only in reference to whether or not you use an outline for the first draft of your book, and that's how I interpret it as. But I'm sure there are some people out there that only consider a pantser a pantser if they don't plan out anything, including the world, and they just let it all come to them. And then the opposite extreme. You're not a planner if you don't plan out the literal everything. I consider myself a pantser, obviously. But I plan out my characters, I plan out the world, I plan out the magic systems, all that jazz. I just don't do any planning for the manuscript itself for the first draft. Keep in mind, there are advantages and disadvantages to both plotting and pantsing. It's not purely advantages on either side. A pantser might think of an outline as restrictive, but a planner knows that's not true. Outlines can be modified over time as for what suits your needs. As a planner, you would have everything written out in advance, so if you get stuck, all you have to do is pull open the outline and you know exactly what to do, and then you can just keep going. Planners very rarely get writer's block as a result of this. A plotter might think of pantsing as too chaotic, whereas pantsers think of it as very freeing, as a way of letting your creativity develop naturally. But pantsers are also more prone to getting writer's block than planners do, as a result of obvious lack of planning. I'm not that far into my manuscript, and I already lost track of how many times I've just sat in my chair staring at my screen because I couldn't figure out what I was going to write next. More often than not, I would have to sleep on it or even wait until I come home from work the next day before I would even come up with something that I feel would be suitable enough to write down to continue on with the story. Now, if what I said so far doesn't exactly convince you one way or the other, how about some examples of authors that go to either extreme? So for plotters, we have John Grisham, we have R.L. Stine, we have J.K. Rowling, and we have Brandon Sanderson. If you're talking about pantsers, we have Margaret Atwood, we've got Pierce Brown, we've got Stephen King, George R.R. Martin, Neil Gaiman, and Jerry Jenkins. Now, I don't mention anyone for pantsers because when I did my research, everything came up basically as like one thing or the other, not the middle of the road. That being said, pantsing is a newer term, so I didn't expect it have as much of a widespread catch as the other two that have been around much longer. Plus, a couple of the authors that I mentioned, for example, Brandon Sanderson, have done a bit of both. They just prefer one over the other. In Sanderson's case, he prefers plotting. In the cases of both George R.R. Martin and Neil Gaiman, both of them prefer pantsing. If nothing else, the authors that I have mentioned are proof that you can write a great book as long as you find what method works best for you and you stick with it. I have all related links for the authors that I mentioned in the description below if you would wish to check it out for yourself. And once more, to drill it home, just in case you need to hear it again, just because someone else says that plotting or pantsing is the way to go doesn't mean it's the right one for you. You have to figure that out for yourself. Whatever works best for you is the right way for you. Who gives a shit what anyone else says? They don't matter. What works for you is what matters. Feel free to tell me your story in the comments below of how you figured out which method was right for you, if you have, or any other comments or questions you might have on this particular topic. And with that, I would like to thank you all for watching. I post a new video every Tuesday and Friday. Have a good one, guys. Bye!